Hello, this is Dr. Andrew Bernstein, also known as Dr. Fashion. And welcome to The Look TV, everything fashion, beauty, and retail. And today, it's all about vintage, fashion, clips, everything that we'd like to see and everything that's out there. From 50 years of fashion, from Coco Chanel to the new look with Christian Dior, from Saint Laurent to Giorgio Sant'Angelo, from Gianfranco Ferré to Armani. Fashion has been with us forever. But we haven't seen many of the fashion shows that have been around for 60, 70 years. Couture fashion shows in Paris, Milan, and Rome. We're going to yesteryear to see many of the most famous fashion shows, models that were out there. And we're going to take you there through VIDCAT and Janet Pytowski. She's incorporated some of the most incredible vintage fashion show clips for the last 60 and 70 years. And we're going to show those to you today on The Look. Welcome back to The Look TV. I'm Dr. Andrew Bernstein, also known as Dr. Fashion. And today it's all about fashion history through videos. Through the age of fashion, for over 70 years, 100 years, fashion looks have been with us at the best runway shows around the world, from Rome and Paris with couture shows, and also in New York City and the UK, Spain, and so many other places. They're in our minds as buyers and celebrities go to the shows, dressed in the nines, going and seeing some of the greatest designers and collections of all time. Balenciaga, Dior, Valentino, Courrèges, Ungaro, and so many others. And here, to take us back in time, to fashion show history, where in its day it was all the glory, is Janet Pytowski, the visionary and founder of VIDCAT in New York City. And Janet has done this for so many years, getting videos, creating videos, saving videos as archives for fashionistas, for designers, for retailers, for everybody who loves fashion history. She is the go-to person when you want to see a show and don't know where to go. You contact VIDCAT and Janet, and she and our archives have the most incredible showcases of designers in black and white and color for decades and decades. So Janet, it's great to have you on The Look TV and to share some of the great fashion history moments today with models, with designers, with the retailers, what happened that most of us in the world, and certainly on The Look TV, have dreamed about, seen on TV and the newsreels, but never have had that front row ticket to be at Valentino or Dior, Saint Laurent. And you today are going to walk us through as if we're there to see and talk about some of the started.
Hi, Andy. Nice to be here.
Nice to see you and great for having you on the show. Janet, tell us a little bit about you and VIDCAT, how you got started, and why did you do this? Why did you save such great times and moments of fashion history for the world to have and to see? You were really one of the first putting these collages together, these showcases together of fashion history. What got you to do it and why?
Originally, we started out, I was a video producer, and we were producing videotapes for designers. I love fashion, so we stuck to fashion. I'm in New York. I'm in the fashion capital of New York, and we had our contacts here. So we were contacting designers and they were contacting us to videotape their fashion shows, do training tapes, trend reports, and most importantly, video press releases, which at the time was we would make a 90-second press release about a new look or a new collection or what's happening and send it out to the news stations, and then they were played as part of their news features. And what we realized, and just in terms of business, is that there was more and more producers and production companies coming in, following us at the same time. But not too many distribution companies were available. Everyone was producing, and then the client would get the tape and say, now what do we do with it? And it was all up to them, and they were fashion, they weren't broadcast people. So that's when we made the decision to not only do production, but really concentrate more on distribution. So saying that, we did all the production work. We had the videotapes. We sent it out to broadcast stations. Just like today, it would be digital and on the internet. In those days, it was a hard copy. I had to go out within 5 hours of being edited so that it could be shown on broadcast the very next day, which you, Andy, remember. We did that with Martha's.
Yeah, we talk about that for a minute. Obviously, my family was Martha's in New York, and we had the pleasure back in the late 1980s when Kristen Lacroix, one of the really important and most famous designers of that time, created his first ever couture show. And couture is really certainly the ultimate one-of-a-kind fashion. Dior did it, Valentino, Saint Laurent, and so many other designers. To be a couture house is the ultimate. And Kristen Lacroix came to New York in the late 1980s and presented a show at Martha's on Park Avenue, New York. And Janet, you were there. The place, we had the press, we had Women's Wear Daily, Vogue, New York Times. Everybody was there to see and meet and see the incredible Kristen Lacroix. At the time, it was all over in every publication. But you were there to make it fashion history because you recorded it. What was that like, and how did you do that? Because now, if we want to look at it, one of the only places to see it is through VIDCAT. Tell us a day in the life of doing a production like that, which we know today is so important. We have that on record, but tell us how you did it at that time.
What we did is we were contacted by Martha's to videotape it. So first we had the pre-production meetings where we spoke to Martha, and we also got an idea of what they were looking for, how long, and all the technical details, the lighting we had to do, because it was inside her boutique on Park Avenue in New York. So we had to fix the lighting on that to make it right for our video cameras, which at the time was 3/4-inch video cameras, the broadcast standard of the time. We had to set up the camera and work around just as they do today. It was a nice runway show. But since it was at the boutique, there were columns and mirrors there. So technically we had to accommodate for that, which we did. And then when we finished it, I believe we sent it out to many of the broadcast networks here in New York as well, so that they could play it on the news, and Martha's would get some publicity as well for that. And so it was very exciting because couture was personally my first couture show. I was used to the Pret shows in New York on 7th Avenue. So seeing the beautiful models and the craftsmanship of couture, it really made me even more interested in fashion.
And Janet, could you tell us maybe some of the other shows? I know you've covered so many shows. I know you still do, New York Fashion Week. I was there and you were there. Can you tell us really how it's changed? I know today with the different camera work, I mean, people can take their iPhone and really do a great show and great showing of that show, and certainly with the quality. So tell us a little bit about, what you're doing today, what then from, let's say, 20, 25 years ago when things were a bit different.
Right, right. Well, today, because of, as you said, the digital aspects of video, now everybody's a video producer. Who's ever sitting in the front row is a video producer. And it's it's hard, you know, because we were professionals and we were hired actually by the clients, by the designers. But we had a different perspective because we were at the head of the runway. So we had a whole different perspective of that, as somebody sitting in the second or third row would get a different kind of shot. And also when we were doing it, everybody wanted to see the entire show. They wanted to see the whole show and the flow and the music. And I think that unless you're at the head of the runway and you have professional video equipment, you're just going to get like a shot or a piece, which works well for social media. But old school people, we like to see the whole show and hear the music and just concentrate on the fashion more so than just a moment. We want to see the whole thing. And what we did is we kept all of the, we call the masters. So we kept all of the video masters, put them on the shelf, took them out when somebody needed them, and then started digitize. Just about a few years ago, we started digitizing. It's over 500 tapes or 500 different shows. So we started doing that and then put it on the web. We have an online website, VIDCATplus.com, where we have it all. It's very easy to search and people can go there and look at it. It's by decade and designer. So they can see, and it's the full shows, just the way we shot it, as well as also some cute fashion films, and it was 80s. So we try to, who's ever interested in trends or anything like that can look it up, as well as fashion footage, which
Tell us some of the really interesting and exciting shows. I know we're going to be looking at them here on The Look, whether it's an Oscar de la Renta show or Ralph Lauren or Valentino or Dior. What are some of the shows that when you went to film it or you were there, you say, wow, this is incredibly made it special, a moment in the show where the designer coming out? Can you give us a couple of takes on some of the things that we're seeing here today on The Look that were special to you and you can share with our viewers?
collect all the newsreels from the National Archives. And we do have that. And for myself personally, I tend to think of fashion in terms of decades, like the look of a decade or the designers that were most popular in that decade. So when we talk about the newsreels, which is the black and white footage, that's from the 50s and the 60s mostly. Very important to me moments in terms of history. That to me was important in the 50s. These hats. Women always wore hats when they went out. So they did a lot of newsreel stories just on different hats. And that's interesting to see, the hats and the jewelry. In the 60s, I always think of a mod and how it
Mother.
related to what was going on in the world. We have a great story, space age fashions, astro fashions.
Yes.
Because in the late 60s, as you know, when we started exploring space, immediately, since that was what was happening in the world, what happened then is we started having more space age looks like plastic and
Like
boots.
Courage.
Courage, yes, definitely Courage, and different helmets and see-through looks, which we see today as well. So, and the Mondrian look, you know, from Saint Laurent, you know, so we have, so when you think of that, how they took off, the trends were basically came from what was happening in the world of art, what was happening in the world of technology. And the first ones to pick up on that would always be the fashion designers and how they translated that into fashion and how people recognized it immediately and said, yes, that's it. It's what's happening now. I want it. So to me, it was more that than specific designers. It was more how people related to a look that had to do with what was going on at the time. Then I think of the 80s, you know. So I think of large shoulders. And my favorite, of course, was Bob Mackie.
Bob Mackie.
Nice
One of my
man,
favorites too.
designer, fabulous shows, just so glamorous and very Las Vegas, like today is Las Vegas. Then it was really Las Vegas. And I love
Designing
the
for
shoulders.
Cher and Mary Tyler Moore
Yeah.
and so many others. He was just wonderful, and he still is. He's just an incredible designer, doing much in circus, as you know, and in clown costumes as well,
He could
which
do
is very,
anything. He could do anything.
yeah.
He's just so talented and so much fun. and just enjoys. You could tell when a designer really enjoys what they're doing. It shows in their attitude. And like you said, when they come out on the runway, they're smiling and happy and they're not embarrassed. They're not too serious. They just love when they're happy that it's done. So that to me was the 80s. And the 90s was Bill Glass, the ladies who lunch. And supermodels. That was the supermodels of the 90s. That's what defined it, really. All of a sudden, the model defined the clothes instead of the clothes defining the model. It was interesting.
And models are just so big today. We see them in the covers of Vogue still for 50th anniversary of Vogue, and they look incredible. The Crawfords and everybody, they just look so wonderful.
It was
Like they have never aged.
like surprising. You wouldn't think of a model as being the defining. But I think that happened in the 80s and the 90s. Is when the model became, the designers talked about the model. They never used to before that.
Right. And what about, we talked about that, your archives are still so important. You have over 500. And I mean, you are the archives for fashion history, if you think about it. And talking to you earlier, you have designers, fashion historians, stylists, retailers, so many probably coming to you like they would go to a museum like the Met and looking at pieces that are 100, 200 years old and coming to you and saying, hey, I would like to look at that, or I'm doing a dissertation, or I'm doing a master's thesis on Givenchy, and coming and studying from your archives. I mean, that's still going on because you really are keeping those and having them in a safe place for all of history, which I think is incredible, even though, they are getting digitized and so forth. But any funny stories of people who have written or emailed you and said that they would, they're researching this or doing a movie or a book or whatever, and they look at your stuff and whatever. Anything come to mind from the past?
I look at it more as a resource, like the library or an archive. So people come to it for different reasons, and they don't always tell me. Well, but I could tell I know what they're searching for. So it gives me an idea of what people are looking for. I would say the number one thing is supermodels. Everybody wants to see the supermodels, because they're in the 90s, the top ones. And I think the younger generation, they're in their 20s, they didn't have the chance to really see it live like they do now. So they like to go back and look at that, or they've heard the stories, or even other up and coming models that want to see what was the big deal about this, and get an idea for it. So, I mean, we have everybody coming in from model schools and colleges and universities just to study and use it as a reference. I try not to put my personal judgment on it. I look at myself and the archive as more as documenting fashion, more so than what was good or what was bad or what I found interesting to me. These are documents, video documents of fashion, and people comfort for different reasons.
And as I said, it was so interesting because like the old show on CBS called You Are There, which I think was back in the 60s with Walter Cronkite. And it brought you in history, whether it was Napoleon or whatever. In this case, you are there. I mean, you and I and perhaps some of our viewers had the opportunity to go to a fashion show, whether in their city or perhaps abroad, but we really got front row seats to some of the best shows. Again, whether it's Lydia DeRoma or Mila Schoen or Valentino, Chloe, or any of those designers, whether the couture or ready to wear. Most people don't or didn't get to see that. So many of the cases they want to go further on history, they need to go and see something from VidCat or something on a newsreel that's digitized that they can find online. That's how you see everything in the past. So this is something that is so important. I mean, today we're going to have that because it's so easy to get all that material with all social media and all the
the ways that we can do it electronically and so forth with cameras and everything. But again, back in the day, it was you and so other few people that had, this experience to give us this experience. I mean, if you go to see a designer, you would go and see their lookbook, right? Or their sketches, or go to their showroom to buy something, or see their illustration, which is very important. I always can mention that in the early days of couture, if you're looking back in even the 40s and the 50s, to go to a couture show in Paris or in Rome, you had to pay an entree fee, an entrance fee, because again, the designers were always worried that you might copy one of their designs. And the only way you could do something maybe is sketch something. So you would see a lot of sketches maybe in the New York Times or in the International Herald Tribune. Today, obviously, everybody's taking a picture, like we said. So it's so important to have this, Janet, to have VIDCAT and that kind of series that we can see and look at and really see fashion defined over the last, 50 years or more. It's so important. So with that being said, what will happen in the future? There's always place for Janet Pytowski and VIDCAT, but how will
Again, just as a resource, that's the way I look at it, as a video resource for fashion, and let people take from it what they want. They can look at it, they can do whatever they want, make whatever assumptions that they can, but you will find things there, as you were saying. One of the interesting things that we started doing in the mid-90s, nobody ever used to do this. We started going backstage before the show. And it was mostly because we had the crew and we were just waiting and waiting and waiting for the show. So at one point we said, why don't we just ask if we could go backstage? And the people backstage were stunned because nobody had asked that. And they eventually got us permission and we would go backstage. And that was interesting because then we started not only having footage of the hair and makeup and models backstage in a reality type of situation, but we also interviewed them. And we were, if we could if we had access to interview the designer, we started doing that and asking them for personal information about the show and their inspiration and how they did it and what they think. But also the hair and makeup people. We have quite a few videos online backstage where we were interviewing like that. It was so interesting to me because it was all about how a hairdresser would interpret the theme of the show into the hair, and you never really thought about that. They would show you how they did it and why they did it. The good ones knew anyway, the good ones. So they would tell you how and why, and we would show that. And we started doing that in the early 90s or mid 90s. Now it's pretty commonplace, but nobody was doing it at that time.
And Janet, the only one really doing that, and perhaps you were even a little bit ahead of them, was Elsa Clench on CNN Style.
Yes,
Elsa would go
I loved
everywhere.
it. I love that show.
And what you were doing was exactly what Elsa did. In fact, the look is a little bit, look TV is a little bit like what Elsa Clench did. She was so glamorous. She's passed a few years ago, but she would go to Valentino's show, backstage, like you said, talk to the models, interview Valentino or Karl Lagerfeld from Chanel, and she would just go back and look at the accessories and the clothes and the makeup and the hair. It's like you were there. And I know you were doing that too. And again, you're right. Everybody does that today. A stylist, videographers do that. In yesteryear, it was just that glamorous time of, again, waiting every week for Elsa Clench and Style to come on CNN, and where she would be in Rome or Paris or Spain or New York, sitting down again with Valentino, or it could have been Oscar Lorenta, and really talking about their past, their inspiration, and so forth. That just like you are and what you've been doing with VidCat.
I had a little bit of mixed feelings about it when I was doing it and putting it out there, because I felt like the mystique was gone. Because once you put it out there and it's backstage and what really happens, where's all of a sudden when the models come out, you know what they went through. I say, wouldn't it be better just not to know and just watch the models come out? leave it as a mystique. And it was usually pretty privately held. It was guarded backstage.
You've been in this business a long time. Can you give us, I know it's your thoughts and whatever, but who are a couple of your favorite designers or a collection, or could a way to take VidCat there to capture the moment in the show?
Of course, Bob Mackie has always been my favorite. He's just a nice person. He puts on the theater, and it's just a whole different idea. You know, the Bill Blair shows were wonderful. They were so New York. They just remind me of New York and the socialites and everything. So I love covering his show as well. The international people, when they were designers that would come and show in New York, that was great. You know, Vivienne Westwood in the 90s was showing here, and that was like shocking. I mean, New York had never seen anything like it. You know, the clothes and the makeup and the hair. And that was a wonderful experience at the time.
And for everybody who wants to know more about Janet Pytowski and VidCat, we have all the information for you at thelooktv.net and vidcat.com. So thank you, Janet, for being with us today. It was a pleasure.
Okay, thank you, Andy.
Thank you. And everybody, we'll be right back.